let's get rolling with the content again. You're at the Startup Success for Non-Technical Founders session. We've got an hour blocked of this time. I really appreciate folks joining in. I think time is one of the most precious resources that we all have, and so I appreciate you taking some time to join into this conversation. And my goal here is to help share the things that I've learned over the years about creating success as a non-technical founder, which is my experience, and excited to share those things with you. So let's dive into the specifics. What we'll be talking about today in this session overview is really, why now? Why is now a great time to be a non-technical founder? What are some helpful mindsets when you're entering into this work? Some key concepts that I think have really helped me making good decisions, and when I work with clients and they're prioritizing what they're doing, keeping these concepts in mind. And then we'll take a deeper dive, really the chunk of our time, into this journey from idea to company, and what are some of the different activities that are appropriate and goals for each stage as you take from an idea to a product to a company across the different lenses of the business that include the business itself, the design and marketing side, the technical side, and then fundraising. So there's a few different slices in there. And one of the things that I love to do in my work as the CEO of Cloudburst is to help founders identify where they are and what's the right next step for them, whether it's technology related or not. I think it really makes a difference to try to be focused on the right thing with the time and resources that you have. And then I expect we'll have some time for Q&A, and I'm also open to input as we go through, in terms of if there are questions that come up or something that we talked about that you'd like to dive a little bit deeper into. So taking a look through the polls quick, it looks like there's a bit of a range between folks that are just curious, few in the idea stage, more in the building stage, and then some that have already launched, and none so far indicating revenue. So thanks for sharing that information. It's great to kind of understand where we are on this journey. Sounds like people would say conversational in startup jargon words. So that's also helpful for me to hear. Part of my goal is to make these things more accessible to non-technical founders, people who bring experience in life and in work, but maybe not in the technical lens. So hopefully speaking a language that people can understand and want to learn. And yeah, so far it seems like there's interest on the marketing side, the business side a bit, and less on the tech and financing side. So again, we'll kind of cover through each of those stages, but that's really helpful for me to know what it is that you're interested in and what would be valuable in your time. So, all right, let's jump right in. So why now then? The reality is there's never been a better time to launch a tech company. And that's true for a number of reasons, really. The costs and the investment required in terms of setup on the tech side has really come down. You don't have to buy servers anymore. There's a lot of progress that you can make without writing your own code, or even the writing of code is a lot more accessible to people without an engineering degree, whether they're self-taught or come through a boot camp. And really, looking for a technical co-founder is a classic struggle for a non-technical co-founder, and trying to figure out what the options are. But really, these days, you can get yourself to market and start to generate traction without having that person. Because chances are, if they're there, you already know them. They're a childhood friend, they're a sibling, maybe you are the technical person. But if you don't already have that relationship, this is a really tricky one to find. And I would really recommend that you just kind of hold off on finding that person until you know that you've got a product and a vision that's worth investing in, because you're going to have to convince them on why it's worth doing. So secondarily, I said a number of things here. Really, you can leverage no-code or low-code platforms, and we'll talk about what some of those options are, and technical partners like Cloudburst to help get started and de-risk the way you're actually going about the work that you're doing. And really, there are some interesting and exciting possibilities for not only non-technical, but also folks that have lower access to capital based on funding mechanisms and other arrangements that are available and sometimes overlooked. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. So there's never been a better time to launch a tech company. However, the flip side of that is it's never been easier to overbuild the wrong thing. Just because everybody can do it and there are so many options, it's really possible to get overwhelmed and stuck in terms of what all of the possibilities are. And so part of what I hope in this conversation is to share some things about how do you identify which are the next things and how do you focus on the user and really understand what is something that should be built. Because honestly, the number one reason that startups fail is that they're building something that the market doesn't need. It's not so often that the tech doesn't work. Sometimes that's the case, but more often than not, you're building something that not enough people want, or they're not willing to pay for, or they don't understand. So this is something we want to watch out for, is not overbuilding the wrong thing. And all that is to say, really, there's much more to building a tech company than the technology. And so Cloudburst, I'm CEO and founder of Cloudburst, and I'm a non-technical founder myself. I have an art degree and a broad base of entrepreneurial experience. And I've really only recently come to technology in the last 10 years, really, and was really drawn to the ability to scale and make an impact through technology. But all that is to say, there's much more to the company than just the tech. And at Cloudburst, our goal is to help non-technical founders build tech companies that succeed, not just build stuff, but help people who want to build a company that succeeds. So a little bit more about me. As I said, non-technical founder with an art degree, bootstrapped and self-funded a number of startups kind of in the tech and non-technical space. I am an optimist, just full disclosure. I'd like to see people succeed. I like to think things are possible and willing to work hard to make it happen. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm recently an investor, which is really exciting to kind of turn the corner into an opportunity to invest in other people and their ideas. I'm really biased towards a bootstrapping mindset or a self-funded or an indie founder mindset, which is really about doing what you can with what you have. Not that venture capital or other resources or big visions shouldn't be on your radar, but what I've seen so often is that folks focus too soon on the things that they need from someone else in order to succeed. So when you're talking to me and you're talking to Cloudburst, just know that that is the perspective that I would be coming from, is how do we help you make progress with what you have so that ultimately you have more independence and freedom and control over what you do. And the second bullet there, I'm not an attorney. I'm not an accountant. I've had a lot of experiences with a lot of them, but some of the things that I say in here are related to those parts of your business. And please don't take that without getting some other counsel. But I also think those are places that you can make mistakes and spend money that hopefully I can help you avoid. So disclosures about me then. So let's talk about mindsets. And really, over the last couple of years, I've been doing sessions at Startup Week and mini demo about founder-friendly ways to get started and get funded. And this is kind of the next iteration on that work, which is really over the last year, I've realized how important the mindset is for a successful founder. And so I wanted to put a little bit more energy into that this time around. So at the core, really, I think that this design thinking mindset, which is really pioneered by a company called IDEO, all about designing and the design process, is a great frame of mind to have. And probably that's acknowledging some of my bias as an art major and a person who cares about design, is that if we can approach launching a startup, building a product, building a company with a design thinking mindset, I think you're more likely to enjoy it and have more success. So design thinking has a number of different kind of specific mindsets to it. So one is embracing ambiguity. And, if you aren't comfortable with ambiguity, I guess I would recommend now that you just kind of stop the startup journey. And you got to see possibility in ambiguity. And it's nerve-wracking. I've had plenty of sleepless nights and some really challenging times, but just trusting that as I keep doing good work, meeting good people, there will be possibilities that arrive, and that ambiguity can create possibility. But it's a challenging place to live. Creative confidence, again, this kind of ties back into your own ability. One of the reasons I love working with entrepreneurs and founders in our work is that they know something about something that they want to make a unique contribution to the world about how they think about anything from mental health to education to the art business. And so embracing that for yourself, that it's a creative act, and having confidence in your own ability to not only just create one thing, but be able to continue being creative. Then making things, make it like that. Things can maybe start in the idea phase, but you need to get them into the world. So a mindset of, what can I make? What can I do? How can I turn this thing so it's not just words on a screen? It's not just ideas in my head. It's a thing in the world that can create value for someone that I can get feedback on. Optimism, as I mentioned, like that, I think will serve you well. I like to say rational optimism, ideally, because myself included have put more time than I should into ideas and companies that weren't demonstrating the level of traction that really warranted my continued focus. But you've got to be able to see the bright side of opportunity and be willing to keep going. Empathy, again, that's keeping the user at the end, letting go of your ego a bit, being able to understand someone else's problem. You need to come to the market with your own ideas of a problem that should be solved. But to have the most success, you just need to be open-minded to what it is that people actually want. And that's what they're going to be willing to actually use and ultimately pay for. And again, I've had the experience myself. I worked for a number of years on building a platform that I really believed was what the world needed. But it wasn't what people ultimately said they wanted. And I've done other projects that I worked for just a couple months and built something that really hit the mark. And it's a lot more satisfying ultimately to build a product that people use and get value from, even if it's not exactly what you thought you wanted to build, especially when you're keeping that user at the center of the conversation. Next is iterate, iterate, iterate. That's an agile way of thinking of it, just taking a step at a time. Build, measure, learn, keep working through cycles, and just get some momentum going. And then, of course, that implies failure and hopefully learning from failure as a mindset that it's really a step towards some future success. How can I leverage what I learned in this stage, something that I built, a person that I met, a skill that I developed that's going to help me apply what I've learned to whatever comes next. And at the end of the day, really, your role is to navigate this somewhat roller coaster of going from hope to learning things and gaining insights, and somewhat discouraging sometimes to realize that the reality isn't quite what you thought. But the good news is you come out of the other side of that with confidence that you've not just had an idea that you didn't tell anybody out and you think it's great. You had an idea that you shared with people, or a product that you made. People gave you information, and some of it they loved and some of it they didn't. And then you come back out the other side of that with some confidence that we actually have something that's worth continuing to invest my time and energy into. So I would encourage you to do more research if that's interesting to you on user-centered design, and just kind of keep that in mind, that it isn't the story that you read about overnight success or the things that get the most notoriety these days. It's really an up and down process that ultimately can be very satisfying, but having the right mindset makes a huge difference. In addition, I think there are a few key concepts that don't come out in the mainstream narrative as frequently as I would like to see, that are really kind of helpful, again, of how people are thinking about their approach to launching a startup. So number one, I would say your time is valuable. And again, thanks for spending some time here. We're blessed in Minnesota to have a number of resources, and even online, lots of things that founders can do, lots of ways that you can spend your time. And I think just being mindful that your time is valuable. Maybe you're constrained on other resources, but just your time and your focus on your business is super valuable. And so do what you can to keep that focus on moving yourself forward. Another concept, a question that I love to ask is, what would you do if you had the insert money, app, product now? A lot of founders come to me and they're waiting to get started until they've gotten money. And so they need to get the money. And generally, if you ask this question, what would I do if I had the thing I think that I need that stands in my way? There's a decent chance that you could do that thing anyway. You could build your customer list before you have a product to sell them. You could send an email outreach to see if people will respond to you. You could try to schedule coffee meetings and conversations. You could set up landing pages. We'll talk about this, but you can talk about what you're doing before you have it. One thing that I have done sometimes is it's easy to think all the way through to, well, if I reach out to this person, they're going to want this, and then they're going to ask for that, and then they're going to definitely need to have some kind of presentation, and I need to have all this figured out. You just kind of take it a step at a time. Will they even respond to you? Do they care about what you're talking about? Do they need something more from you in order to take the next step? And then if they do, then you make that thing. So step at a time and challenge yourself to think, what would I do and how can I do it anyway? Another one is an idea is not a company. It's kind of like we'll talk about through this session, is that you can start up here with a lot of ideas. Ideas come quickly. Ideas are exciting. I like ideas as much or more than the next person. But there's a real process to try to figure out which types of ideas are just ideas, which ones get refined into being a product, and then how does that become something that is actually a company? So a product being something that other people use and find value in, and a company something with a level of revenue or business model that actually makes it sustainable. And not every idea needs to be a company, but it's easy to jump from I have an idea, I want to make a company, and that implies a lot of things that don't usually end in success. Kind of coming back to why tech, I think as a broadly fan of entrepreneurship, there are so many people working so hard in all kinds of businesses, retail, agriculture, hospitality, much less all the other jobs in the world. Tech sometimes gets a outsized spotlight, I would say. There's nothing more special about a tech entrepreneur than any other kind of entrepreneur. And honestly, I've had some conversations with non-tech entrepreneurs who are like, I don't get it. What are these people even spending their time talking about? I'm out trying to close business and actually make money at what I'm doing. The power of technology really is it's that ability to scale. If you're going to put your blood, sweat, and tears and time into building something, the opportunity that comes with building a tech business is that thing that you build really could scale in value as well as in scope. And that's for me. While I've had experience in manufacturing, wholesale, private equity, other types of businesses, technology is where I've landed and I'm most excited about because of that opportunity to scale. That also applies to impact, not just money, but also impact. How many people could be impacted by your ideas and what you're working on? Another concept, cheap talent is expensive, and I've done this myself. It's so tempting to think about someone's hourly rate and what they say they can get done and how quickly. But the relationships really matter, and especially in the early days of your startup, the technical decisions that you make and how you think about the technology side is really foundationally important. Because again, I had a number of conversations with founders where they're months and tens of thousands of dollars into building something already, and they're realizing that it's just not going to be on the path to success, and things need to get rebuilt. And it seems faster, but more often than not, it's just the path towards complexity and taking more time. And I certainly would acknowledge that everybody has different levels of resources to be able to invest in their startup or their tech partner or anything like that. But that's partly why I'm also excited to share some other options for how people can tap into some of those tools. I mentioned this earlier, but the right tech at the right time and just kind of this iterative approach of where are you with understanding the needs in the market and your business, and then what are some technical solutions that can help solve that. And again, so often people go from I have an idea to I want an app in the App Store. And there's a lot of things that you can do on that continuum between those two things to learn and save yourself time and money. And really what it comes down to, I would say for you as a founder, is product management. And that's a role that lives at the intersection of user experience, UX, so technology and business. So really, is there something that people want that we can make that becomes a viable business? And you as the founder are kind of perpetually in that spot of balancing how well designed the designer, wants it to be, and how fast the business wants it, and how robust generally the engineers want to make it. And you just kind of have to try to balance those things. But it's a really exciting place to be. So I would say for you, if you're a CEO, founder of your own company, like that's really your best place. Is you need to know about each of those things and coordinate them between them. And side note here, I have to shout out to Martin Erickson, who came up with a Venn diagram in 2011 that seems to have gotten a lot of traction. Like, I could have drawn something, but why? Somebody else already did a perfect one, and we'll use it. So great. So foundational concepts, and I especially wanted to take this product manager lens kind of into the next conversation and these threads of user experience, tech, and business as we jump into the next phase, which is really this journey from idea to company. And so I want to shift this into a tool called Miro, which is more of a whiteboard-based sticky notes type of tool. And let me get that launched here. And hopefully this will work out fine. Yeah, there we go. Zoom in there. So this is a canvas that really, a matrix, if you will, that dives into kind of what I would see as the progression from idea to company, from the left to the right, and kind of down the side here, we've got the business side. Is this something valuable? The user experience, is it usable? The tech side, is it feasible? Can we actually do it? And then on the lower section here, funding, like, is it viable, and what are some of the options? So my approach here would be just to kind of go through the different pages here and talk about some of the specific solutions. And folks are welcome to chime in if there's something we want to look at a little bit more closely. But again, I think it's in years past, I've kind of given out a list of here's a bunch of resources and here's a variety of things that you can do. And my hope with this year is to make it a bit more about if you can find yourself in this general landscape and see which things would resonate most. This idea of like what to focus on is really important. So let's jump in on the idea side with on the business piece of it. So really, in this business section of the idea stage, really what you're wanting to do is validate your idea and start learning things. So when it comes to your product, you need to define what it is. That's a key job of the CEO, of the founder, is to think about who this is being built for and what it actually needs to be. Need to be going through very creative ideation and like design phases to figure out what it might look like or how it could work. Testing your assumptions and your hypotheses with people, presuming you're building this for other people to use, to get it in front of them. And then, prototyping is really how can you express what you're building to other people so that they can experience it without you needing to build the whole thing. And whether that's just a certain type of features or whether it's a particular user experience, there are lots of ways to prototype things that we will talk a bit about. So I'd say you really want to keep your product focused in these kind of lightweight. We're just trying to figure out how might we solve this problem that we think that people have. On the company side, of course, that's an important part of actually, being an entrepreneur. I think you would be focused in this phase on kind of your mission and vision. It's a lot about selling yourself to potential team members and talking to potential customers. Like, what are we all about and why do we care about this problem and these users? I would recommend, keeping your day job or other source of income that you don't know yet that there's something here that you should quit your job for. And again, from my own experience, I invented a product when I was in college and had one phase of my career where I just quit my job. And I just thought, well, if this is my $1 million idea, I need to go all in on it because that's what entrepreneurs do. And I managed also to persuade my wife, who, we were just married at that time, to also quit her job and help me on this business. And I wouldn't recommend that path. We learned a lot, but I think it wasn't a full-time job. And I was being a little bit too relaxed on just jumping out of my other job. So keep your day job until you really can't manage both, would be what I would recommend. But I do recommend setting up a personal LLC It's worth it for every person to have their corporate self. There's a lot of business advantages and things that possibilities that can create it, as well as some personal protection in the event that, something goes wrong. You don't want to put your whole life savings and things at risk. But I would say generally keep the legal docs to a minimum, if none. There may be some, I would say even, trademark work or partnership agreements or incorporation documents. Like, I think if you're at this stage, it's just too soon. Have understandings with people potentially, but let's just figure out if there's something that's worth making a company about before we get ourselves too far. So then when it comes in that idea stage to the user experience, and this gets into a little bit of the marketing side, which I know folks are interested in, is like, how do we build an audience and listen to them? We've got to figure out who are the people that are going to be excited about what we're building. And again, it can be everything from, I already know this problem. These are my customers. I just want them to have this experience and no other person is making it. I want to make my own software. That's really empowering. And that can be a great application of technology. It can be, I have an existing audience and they have this need. Or it can be, I have this need and I wonder who else has this need. And so it's really tools like creating surveys, asking people. Again, that's where you're going to get some data and you're going to get some people ignoring you. And that's going to be that little chasm of despair that you just got to work through. Because if nobody else wants it, you probably shouldn't build it. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't build something. You got to just figure out what is it that they actually want. So there are tools like landing pages, persona building. This is a classic user experience exercise where you're identifying the specific types of people and attributes that they have and the benefits that your product will provide to them. And these are the kind of points of information that as you're coming to a potential technical partner like Cloudburst, the more that you know about these things really helps inform the product decisions. And this is something that you, as a presumably non-technical founder, can just take care of. You can figure these things out. You can take your first best pass anyway at pulling together complete stories and vision of what you're trying to do. You can understand the competitive landscape. That's really important. A lot of times it's a matter of who is the competition and which couple of things are we competing on. So one of the products that I launched was called Localist. The whole idea of buying and selling with friends and neighbors. And as we were trying to differentiate it from Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace and other things that existed in the world, we kind of came up with this matrix of, okay, it's on this axis of from social to commerce, whether you're connecting with people about, hey, pictures of your kids or cats or just general life updates, or you're buying and selling, we're going to focus on the commerce side of it. And whether it's anonymous transactions or trusted connections, like Craigslist on one end or Facebook on the other, we're trusted connections. So we're like commerce with trusted connections. And that was kind of like where the competitor was. And then how does Facebook and all the other competition fall from there? But if you can kind of really think, what are the couple of things that we do that people are going to care about and make those central to the features that you develop? It's important to get out of the office and talk to people, or yeah, hopefully we can just all be getting out of the office more soon. But either way, get out, talk to people about what you're doing. Don't let months and weeks go by where you're just refining your pitch deck and working on your 10-year spreadsheet. That's just not the right focus for right now. You can start running some ads to test your messaging and your value proposition. You start building out an email list, some tools like HubSpot or MailChimp or Constant Contact, so that when people do express interest, they have a way of staying in the loop. You can leverage a lot of this kind of blue sky upside of just being a startup, that you're not trying to sell somebody something. You're just trying to see if people are excited about the chance for them to have a product built that actually solves their problem. When I've seen people experience using software that they had a part in designing, like most of us historically have just been consumers of software. And part of what's exciting about this next phase is that we all have more opportunities to actually build it so that it works for us in a way that delights us or makes our lives easier or helps our business grow. And so people might be receptive to you, like, sure, I'll take a chance on it. Some people won't, but you want the folks that are willing to pay attention. You can start building social profiles again if that's important. But again, you really got to connect with the audience and figuring out, are you making something that they want? A little deeper dive on the wireframe. So a wireframe really is not software, but it's often built online through tools that help you envision in varying degrees of fidelity what could this look like. And again, this is something that a non-technical founder can do. There are tools like Balsamic and InVision and Figma that you can learn, that you can use. It's fairly straightforward. Again, the professionals can refine what you've come up with and think about accessibility and usability and technical implications of what you might have put together. But it goes a long way for you to appreciate the complexity of software if you actually kind of have to map these screens out. Think about what data would I need and where should it go? So here's a bit more high fidelity example, but also of a wireframe that then you can view on a phone and you can show it to people. And it's a lot less effort and cost to do this than to build the whole thing and then show it to people. Best idea is build it in this way and then show it to people and see if you should build the full thing. So those are some things you can do in the usability UX side with the goal of building an audience and listening. And that really dovetails quite a bit on the tech and feasible side and some more specific tools. So really, when you're going for a proof of concept here, basically just trying to validate that the ideas and what you envision is something that people are actually interested. You don't necessarily have to, certainly don't need to build out a whole thing. Certainly don't need to invest in a lot of custom development to get something built. But it probably at a point makes sense to put up some kind of a landing page or marketing website. And again, this is something that you can do. There are tools, Squarespace, Wix, Doric, Card, Webflow, that are great for landing page builders. So, a landing page, here's one that we did recently for a project called Game Theory. And it's really, this hasn't been built yet, but they're sharing the value proposition of, what you can do and running some ads to get people who are interested in this to request an invite. And in the meantime, the product is being built. So that's an idea of just like a simple landing page that gives your project credibility and lets you maybe test which headlines work best. Will anybody even click? How much does it cost us to get someone on Facebook or Instagram? Then there are other no-code tools. So again, these are kind of, as I would say, tools that I think you as a non-technical founder could use yourself. You can hire people to do these things, but even knowing that these are possible, if you think you want it to go in a lightweight way, find people who are familiar with these tools. If you don't want to teach yourself, and then figure out how to get advice from people who can help you make decisions. So no code is basically meaning no custom code, but it's really has the experience of software where things happen through automations and you can collect information and build your own database through a tool like Airtable, have certain things update other things through Zapier, which is kind of like a no-code API being the way that different applications talk to each other. So when a new thing comes in on this form, put it in a Google Sheet and send an email, that kind of stuff. You can do it. I've done it. It's super satisfying as a non-technical person to get something that feels technical and is working. Another thing to consider really is third-party platforms. I mean, there's no real reason, I think, that you should start out building your own marketplace platform or e-commerce or community site from scratch, unless there's a very specific angle that you have, which sometimes that it might be because you already have a business and you know what people really need. But you can start selling your content in terms of classes on platforms like Teachable, or building an audience with a newsletter like Substack. So again, there's a lot of tools that are out there that allow you to start to create the experience for folks that you want them to have, but it's not the full software. And then on the financing side, really, the reality is at this stage, when it's idea, it's you investing in you, which I think is an appropriate place to start. And you're doing everything that you can do to help turn your idea into something that should be funded. So options, and I've done all of these things: savings, credit cards, personal loans, cash flow from another business, crowdfunding, so like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, something where you sell a vision and people pre-purchase it. And I guess I would say, generally speaking, like this would be in the 0 to 50K range of budget. Like they're, and really potentially, especially if you're doing it yourself, on the lower end of that. Like it will cost some of your time, but as in this idea phase, you want to just kind of not burn through too much money while you're figuring out what exactly should we build, because it only gets more costly to change those things down the road. One thing I did want to call out here is this shared success agreement, which is something that we've developed at Cloudburst to really allow us to partner with founders at this earliest stage. And it's something that I first did about 10 years ago when I was working as a non-technical founder and hired a developer to work on a project. And this shared success agreement really is, quick way of saying it is it's a revenue share. So there are some services that you might do today but get paid for in the future. So it kind of helps the money that you have as a founder go further, and it can help build a tighter connection between you and people that you might partner with on a marketing or sales or technology perspective, because they know that they're going to get paid back when your product launches and you have revenue, and so that you're succeeding together. And maybe they're willing then to put in more of their time at a lower price, which helps you get further. And the thing about a shared success agreement is if there is no revenue, there is nothing paid. So it is a risk on the service provider side, but it just comes to a mutual agreement. There's also upside for the service provider, but it's not equity. So again, it's not figuring out what is my company worth and how much of it should Zach or Cloudburst get. It's just kind of, here's what the Cloudburst or Zach contribution is worth. They should get paid something more than that if my project succeeds, because it might not succeed and they might not get anything. And so, yeah, thanks for your comment, Chris, about the shared success agreement. This is available, like sharedsuccessagreement.org. It's not proprietary to Cloudburst. I would hope more people would embrace using it, and I'm happy to chat with folks about how it works. But again, kind of born out of my experience on both sides of the table there of how can I get further? I don't know about the equity conversations, but I'm happy to give someone upside. If we can just make something that is a thing, then let's share in it being successful, as opposed to figuring out how we need to split it up right away, or one person taking a lot of cash needs going on. So that's really kind of where we're at on the funding side and the idea stage. And I would say, 6 to 12 months, like it will take a while. Things can go faster. It kind of depends on where you're starting from, but just to say it'll take a while, but it shouldn't be 2 years. Like we need to keep things moving, because inevitably, hopefully you'll be able to pivot to finding a thing that is worth moving into the next phase with. So that next phase really is what I would say is a product phase, where you've been able to validate that you have an idea and dial in, there's somebody that's excited about using this thing. I can solve this problem for this person. And so in that phase, your goals are really like to get traction and product market fit, which means, again, figuring out exactly how you can solve it. It's like, okay, people want us to solve this problem for them. One client we had was making art appraisals, and it's like, yes, art appraisers do have a problem because it's a hassle to create Word docs and upload all kinds of photos all the time. Okay, there's still a lot of different ways that you can solve that problem with varying degrees of technology. So this next phase is, how do we figure out how we get to, on the business side, a usable working product, but probably something you're a bit embarrassed by. There's a classic quote about just like, if you're not embarrassed when you ship the first time, you've waited too long. That is a rough bridge to cross. And the harsh reality is most people aren't going to care when you ship your first thing, as hard as you've worked. You just got to find those few people for whom it's solving a problem that you can follow their lead into what it should really be. So focus on the minimum viable product. That gets a lot of airplay, those terminologies, but it's really just, don't go too far into solving future problems in the present. We've had clients where they are, in order to a user to have the problem that they're articulating, we have to actually launch the app. People have to find out about the app. People have to sign up for the app, and people have to use the app, and they have to come back to it to this level, to all of a sudden we don't have enough storage for photos or whatever the constraint might be. So acknowledging that could be a problem. Let's hope we have that problem in the future, as long as we know that we can address it down the road. That's where having a technical partner to help you make some of those trade-offs about which things you don't want to wait for because we're going to have to re-architect something, and which things it's like that's not such a big deal to add down the road. So then you're also probably focusing on the business model. So if it's multi-sided, who's actually paying for it? Is it the same as the person who's using it? How might we price it? What are the different ways that, what are you wanting to get from the business? And then on the company side, that's where more probably legal documentations might make sense. A DBA, which means doing business as, like if you have your own company, say I have Stephen Enterprises, my last name, I can do business as Wonder Wander, which is the name of my wife's public art app. And we don't have to create a whole new separate company yet, but we can communicate with the world as that. We can accept money as that name through filing with the Secretary of State that's doing business as. So that can be a nice step towards, all right, I'm just going to start acting in the world that way. I don't need a separate company. Or maybe you do. I mean, that's again a nuanced conversation for an accountant about your growth plans and if you're starting to bring on other people. But at a certain point, it is appropriate to have the right legal structures, and they're hard to undo. And certainly investors will want to know where you're at, and certain types of entities are more or less friendly for investors. So hopefully by now you would have some idea of like, are we talking about building the next unicorn type of thing, or is this something that can make me a meaningful amount of income or life experience that I want, and I just want to keep it for myself or a close group? On the UX side, in this phase, again, kind of the product phase, I would say is more of a time to focus on the brand and the logo. Certainly there's some great work that can be done around brand story. It just kind of depends on why someone is going to use your product. If you're solving a real problem that they have and they don't have a different solution for it, you probably don't need to explain it quite as much because they know. On the other hand, if you're a little bit forward looking, or you're solving something in a way that might be just kind of a nice to have, and they're going to use it because of some other reason potentially, then maybe you need more of a story. As far as logos go, we've had really good luck with a platform called 99 Design. So I just put that out there, where crowdsourced a number of different designs, and you can really just kind of work with a variety of designers to hone in on a finished product for under $1,000, in the few $100s range last time I checked, probably. And I think that's generally plenty good enough. I mean, again, like I said, I like ideas. I love logos. I've got more t-shirts than I should probably admit. But at a certain point, the logo isn't the business either. But it does matter, and it's fun. So I think this is a good stage to invest a little bit more time in that. Definitely working on nurturing the leads that you actually have. So people who have expressed interest, how do you find out which sides of your value proposition they're most interested in? So there are tools with marketing automation. So after X number of days, send this campaign to this person, send this survey, let's have a Discord channel. You kind of got to figure out what you want to ask people to do, because again, they are investing their time into your idea, but it's really important to stay in touch with them. Maybe you can build in some viral loops. A classic thing of like inviting a friend or earning some free credits or something helps drive growth. Continuing to iterate on how things are working. There may be a place for customer support, if people are using a product and having issues, and tools like chat on the website, or programmatic things that can just answer common questions or help nudge people to take the next steps with tools like Intercom. Or Drip, shall I say, right here in Minnesota is a great one to check out. So that's the focus on the UX side. On the tech side, we're wanting to get to working software. Like that is huge, to get to a point where you have working software and it's not just pictures anymore. And it is quite a journey to get from the pictures to the software. And sometimes that's where wireframes can be a challenge, in that it looks like it's done, but there's so much that's implied behind those pictures that it's still a ways to go. So good news is there's some great options for non-technical founders to get to working software without even needing to hire someone else to work with. And so these no-code apps are tools like Adalo and Glide that allow you to kind of drag and drop components and use something like Google Sheets as a database, or Airtable. Like you can put a place where you put your own information and you can map the connections. Yeah, Bubble, I see that comment, Joshua, and that's a good one too, for sure. Bubble, I would say, is a more sophisticated in terms of what it's able to do, and a little more complex learning curve, and a little bit less user friendly from the design elements at the front end. But that's kind of what steered me more towards these apps like this one that I made for finding George Floyd murals. Like it's a no code app. So just to say, Bubble is also worth checking out and can get you a lot of the way as well. I just didn't need to go quite that far with some of the stuff that I was building. But this was an app that I built in a weekend a year and a half ago after the George Floyd murder, because my family and I were going out to find murals that Springboard for the Arts was doing a mural project in St. Paul. And I had done enough exploring of no code to be like, I think I could build that app. So that was super satisfying for me, is like, wow, there's something out there. And there's a lot of things that it doesn't do, but that's fine. I'm not trying to make money from it. I just wanted a resource where people could discover these murals, see them on a map. We got them, around the nation, learn about resources, and donate money to organizations that needed help. And I could just make it. So I would encourage you, if you're so inclined, to just explore making things, even if it's just your own tool for your family to schedule, share photos or simple things like that, just to learn what's possible. So not to get too far into the weeds on that, but this was the thing where I didn't, in the past, I couldn't have done that. And I would to hire a developer would have taken probably, 6 months to figure out what we're doing, and very expensive. And this way, this tool allowed me to get it out there in a weekend. Adalo is of a similar, I don't need to dive into that so much, but again, feel free to reach out to me if you have questions about these no-code tools. We actually have a no-code .mn meetup group that we're working on. So the name of the app, are you asking, Temi? It's the app itself is George Floyd mural map. So that's the app. Otherwise, I built it with a tool called Glide. Glide apps. So if you look at this link, I can paste it in over here. The glideapps.io part of the domain is their product. So definitely check that out. So that's built what's called a progressive web application. So it's not going into the App Store. Awesome, Chris. Yeah, exactly. That's the group. Would love to see you there for No Code MN. Progressive web app is a very app-like experience, and the George Floyd app will give you a good feeling of what that's like without going to the App Store, and it's much simpler to build, and it's a great first step. So if that's not a term you're familiar with, I'd recommend learning about that. Webflow is a pretty sophisticated website. Awesome, Catherine. That'd be great. No code. Website builder, but it's so much more sophisticated in terms of how it plays in this website ecosystem of no-code tools. So, I mean, my 2 cents would be like, stay away from WordPress and get yourself onto platforms more of the future. One project that we've built is called QuickTake. And this is what I would say no code. Like, it's basically a platform built on Webflow, and all of the features of it are built using Airtable and Vimeo. And anyway, don't need to get, again, too far into that. But if we're just looking at people, again, it takes a developer, but not the same level of custom software development that if you just wanted to create that whole thing from scratch, we can help point you towards some tools you could leverage. Had one client recently kind of see the opportunities in Salesforce as a platform for kind of the next phase of growth, which totally makes sense. Like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Our goal is to help you find something that people actually want, and that it's at a state where you can afford to get it going, because then inevitably you'll want to build your own thing and kind of go beyond this like semi-custom approach, which we'll get into on the next column here. But and a quick note here too, kind of on the pricing. Like, I think in the earlier stages where there's less ambiguity of what the deliverables are, something for somebody to give you a price to do it makes sense. But as you get into some of the complexities of working software, estimates are totally reasonable. and appropriate, because it's, it takes a level of trust, but it's hard to know exactly what something's going to take. And it's really a partnership between the client and, in our case, like the product development team. So what's frustrating is when someone, my first time I meet them with an idea, is asking for a fixed price on their full vision. It's like, it's just not recipe for success. So quick touch on the funding. I know that's not necessarily the main interest of folks here, but really this next stage is like friendly investors. They more probably are investing in you. They've seen that you've built something that is worth doing. They don't probably know so much about your product. For sure, you've made it more clear, but they're going to invest in you. And so these types of resources, friends and family, convertible debt, accelerators, a shared earnings agreement. That's another one that is related to the shared success agreement, but that's a company fund invests in a revenue share type of approach. So I can share more resources with folks if they're interested. SAFE is a simple agreement for future equity, which is something that sometimes angel and venture folks use. Grants, there's a lot of great programs like Launch MN, has innovation grants available in Minnesota, and other programs. There are like the Minnesota Cup Business Plan Competition or META $1 Million Challenge. That's great, that you can win money at. Of course, yourself, you got to convince yourself that you're willing to keep investing, because it's real, the time and money that you spent. You can try pre-sales. Like if you can fund it through revenue somehow, fantastic. Like how can you entice someone to pay for a whole year instead of just a month, or pre-purchase for some benefit? And then potentially, angel investors. And we have some great ones here in the Twin Cities that are excited about writing, maybe $25,000 to $50,000 checks to help someone get to the next stage before you'd kind of be in the venture capital realm. And this might be 6 to 12 month time frame. And then kind of a little bit of to say, kind of once you get to this next phase, then I'd say a company where you've got a product that's generating some revenue, you want to grow revenue, get to profitability. Again, like the pure bootstrapper would say, accelerate all of these things. Forget about getting other people's money, get to revenue and profitability as quickly as I can. And, no problem with that. It's just kind of sometimes things take time and it depends on the business model. So focus on the business side of growing, thinking about your pricing, analyzing your customer acquisition costs and their lifetime value, looking at your cash flows, figuring out distribution models. Again, it's all a little bit flexible. That's why these are Post-it notes as to what makes sense. So when we work with clients, we try to figure out what makes sense for your type of business at this stage. But really on the user experience side, then we're trying to retain and potentially upsell people. How do we get our free users to go to a paid account? How do we keep the users that we have? How do we get them to refer other people? And how are we really tracking, tracking what people are doing? Thanks, Bridget. I see your question. Yeah, I think there will be time here. Then the tech side, you really want to get to more like code that you actually own that does exactly what you want to do. Because even an awesome Glide app still lives on the Glide platform, which has ultimately some constraints and limits the kinds of things you might be able to do around the data model or certain user roles and rules or AI and multi-language. Like these are some of the things that I would say can come later if we've got something that people really want. And ideally, your approach on this is if you got a team and they're just working like your team, more or less on a retainer of like, I have my product development team helping me respond to what I learn and keep iterating on my product. And then to the extent you're looking for funding in this round, like this is where venture capital would come into play, like people that are investing in your product, in your business. Obviously, they do invest in you. The founding team is a key ingredient in their recipe, but don't go seeking venture capital when you just have an idea. So that's probably enough said there. And I see that we've got folks that have a couple of questions. I will look to those questions and then also can paste a couple of links that I had in the chat too. Just so if people need to jump off, I can stick around for a couple of minutes here too, but let me just get back to this. So, okay, so there's me in a nutshell. And yes, let me get nocode.mn is the link for that meetup group, I think. Well, I'm just have to double check on that. So, okay. Great. So what I put in here is some contact info, ways for you to connect with me and have a follow-up conversation. I can hang around on this chat for a few more minutes as well, but let me just see. So Bridget asked, what advice do you have for online business? So I'm guessing you mean something like you're selling products um, in a store, that type of a thing. I mean, I guess I would really recommend, if that's what you're asking about, a platform like Shopify that's organized around that. Um, yeah, I see a question from Nate about chat and how to turn that on. Maybe it's just in the sidebar if there's a way to like expand the right side of the screen. Um, yeah, Catherine, I will have to see what, yeah, let's have to double check that link. It should be nocode.mn, but I'm not seeing that actually come up. Scott asks, what if you have an idea that is too big for a down and dirty no code MVP? Any ideas on how to tackle stuff like that? So that sounds kind of like eating an elephant. And I would take the age old advice of like one bite at a time, even if it's a big idea, like really find a partner in this case to help you navigate that road and start with the smaller engagement, which is about defining the minimum scope and validating with users the approach of what they actually want. And again, depending on the size of your idea and the team that you're working with, that would vary in size of what that engagement is. And for myself, it can be hard sometimes to like invest the time in that stage because it's like I know what I want and I want to build it. But I guess my quick recommendation would be, yeah, do as much towards what you can do to build an audience or show traction to convince yourself and anybody else that you're working with that there's a real problem to solve. Or maybe you just have the time or the money to just say, I just want to build it, and you can build it. But even if you take that path, I guess I would just say, Scott, like, just try to take it a step at a time as opposed to, okay, great, it's going to be $250,000 to build my whole app. Just a great way to build trust and to validate your learning is some level of initial engagement that helps you learn what it's like to work with the team, helps you all align on what you can actually build. And then from there, then you can really break it out and people can say, well, it takes a team of this size this long. And we were talking about this kind of investments.